I think we've all heard this, but the world is generating more data than ever before. In fact, experts estimate the amount of data that will be generated in the next 2 years will be more than the amount of data created in the entire history of the human race. That's just amazing. And this explosive growth of data is really driving the need for a new and innovative storage solution. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tech Talk Tuesday. I'm your host, Pratik Patel, a technology consultant with Ingram Micro. All this quarter, we've been discussing next-gen storage, data protection, and data management solutions. And that's where Lenovo and WEKA come into the picture. Lenovo and WEKA are two leading solution providers in the storage industry, and they've teamed up to really create a powerful and scalable solution that is suitable for businesses of all sizes. Lenovo is a global technology company that provides a wide range of products and services, including client, workstations, servers, storage, and hybrid cloud infrastructure. And WEKA is a software company that specializes in data management solutions to store, process, and manage data in the cloud and on the prem. So just think about it. When these two powerhouses combine their expertise, the result is a solution that's both efficient and reliable. This collaboration created a groundbreaking software-defined storage, or SDS, solution. Essentially, SDS is a type of storage that uses software to manage storage resources. And this approach can really offer a number of unique advantages over traditional storage solutions. I'll confess, before those initial details, beyond those initial details, this solution is really still new to me. So to help you make sense of it all, we have some amazing guests joining us today. First, we have Ed Stickney, a Director of Strategic Partnerships with WEKA. Thank you for joining us, Ed. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Ed Stickney, based in Austin, Texas, and I manage the global relationship with Lenovo. So I've been working with Lenovo to bring the latest WEKA offering to market.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Hopefully I'm not butchering the name WEKA so many times already, but
No, it's perfect. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Yeah. Next, we have Alex Kranz, a Director of Strategy and Product Management with Lenovo. Great to have you here with us, Alex. Can you tell us about yourself and your role at Lenovo?
Yeah, thanks, Pratik, for having me. So I'm a Director of Strategy and Product Management focused on our storage portfolio. So I've had the pleasure of working with WEKA and helping kind of build their solution and the joint Lenovo-WEKA solution together. So it's been great working with them so far. And I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Perfect. Yep. So next, let's get some logistics out of the way. First, ensure your microphone is muted to minimize any kind of distraction. Next, as mentioned earlier, this event is being recorded, so please note we'll share the recording once it's available on YouTube. Also, please note my teammate Kelsey Jones will be reaching out afterwards with via email. She'll be providing important collateral and even a survey link to gather feedback on today's event. So please keep an eye out on your inbox for that email. And lastly, I want to encourage each one of you to actively participate in our conversation today. Please feel free to share your questions, concerns, comments by typing them into the chat. Since the overall goal of this webinar is really to help channel partners and VARs identify new opportunities and grow their business, I want to hand it over to Ed and Alex so they can walk us through the solution. Go ahead.
All right, sounds good. So now is the moment of truth where I'll share my screen. Pratik or Alex, can you see my screen here?
Yep, I can see it now.
Okay. All right. So I think we've got a variety of backgrounds on the call, and I always, like Pratik had mentioned, I think it's nice to understand really where WEKA came from. What exactly is WEKA? I'll get the obvious question out. Where does the name come from? There's two answers to that question. One is a WEKA byte, which is, I forget how many orders of magnitude later, but if you go beyond exabyte, several more levels, there is actually a WEKA byte. It's a very, very large amount. There's also a bird in New Zealand called the WEKA. So depending which one you prefer, you can go with that and be happy with that. So let's talk more specifically about, there's a lot of storage systems out there today. A lot of different opportunities that can be used for storage. Why is there a need for another one with WEKA? So our company, our founders decided to focus on this specifically in the case of the AI ML workloads. So artificial intelligence, machine learning. Interestingly enough, artificial intelligence is very, very everyone's hearing about that today. Although several years ago when our company was founded, it was still sort of in that scientific realm. But what we found is that the companies that were needing to use or were using AI or AI/ML in their workloads, what you see on the screen here is sort of the start to finish path that they would take in processing their data. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but it's interesting to understand this in the context of why the storage needs have changed. So what you typically see is an example of an AI/ML workload would be like self-driving cars. So self-driving cars, maybe you want to build an algorithm for a car to identify a stop sign and stop at that stop sign. So how would you do that? You'd get a lot of different photos of stop signs, maybe videos. You would ingest them. So you get all those videos, you ingest them into a system. You probably need to change those a little bit. So in the ETL, extract, transfer, and load, you're doing things like changing the color, maybe making them larger, smaller, because you want to make a stop sign look as different as possible so that all the different permutations of the stop sign can be identified. Then you have to move that data again to another type of system. Maybe it's a high performance computing system where you're going to build this model and train this model and run it through many iterations to figure out, did the model that you built, this mathematical model, did it correctly identify stop signs? And then you go back and you refine and you go over and over and over. So each time as you're going through this path, you'll notice that there's a data copy phase. And so
Ed, I think you got muted.
sorry, where did I last end up?
You said data copy phase.
Okay, the data copy phase. Thank you. Sorry, I talk with my hands and I probably hit the mute. So as it's going through the different phases of the model, it's getting copied from different types of storage systems. And I'll talk about that more on the next slide. But basically what happens is you'll notice that there's a lot of these data copy phases. That takes a lot of time because this is terabytes of data. So this isn't sort of, wait 5 minutes and it copies. This could be waiting a half a day and then it's finished. So clearly, if there's something that can be done to shorten those data phases, those data copying phases, or maybe remove them altogether, that would be a significant benefit. And so that is one of the ideals that went into designing a system like WEKA. And so what you see on the left here is an example of a typical AI/ML type architecture where you've got data coming in from the field. It would get copied over to something like a high-speed NAS. It would maybe be staged over to a parallel file system, which is very scalable. It can get very, very large. But then also, when you're doing the actual processing on a high-performance cluster, that may be a case of needing to copy it onto something with very low latency, like local NVMe drives. And so already what we've just discussed there is several different types of storage architectures: parallel file systems, low latency block storage, as well as NAS storage. And so all of these copies taking place, it's easy to look at this and say, well, why do all that? Why don't you just have like one system that can handle all of that, and then you save all those resources and time? And the answer was, well, that's actually a very complicated and difficult thing to do. The good news is that's exactly the problem that WEKA was looking to solve, is there a way to support all of these types of things with one system? And so that's essentially what WEKA is. Number one, it allows support for multiple protocols. So for example, this data that comes in off the field, it may be coming in on like an S3 protocol or NFS, which a lot of these high performance clusters don't speak. And if you're not familiar with protocols, think of them like languages. So going from English to Spanish, but then you've got another system that only speaks Spanish to German. And so as you're kind of moving that data around, you need to have someone that can speak all the languages. And if you have that, then maybe you don't have to move the data as much. Another reason is for high performance clusters, these are very, very dense computing systems. Many cases they have GPUs, which again makes it even more dense. And so you have in a very, very small footprint, a tremendous amount of processing power. So if you think about the data that needs to be supplied to that, it takes a tremendous amount of data to keep all of those processors running. So if your storage system is slow, then that HPC cluster, which they're very, very expensive, by the way, is sitting idle waiting for data. So again, with WEKA, we're able to provide very, very high performance, keep those HPC clusters or those AI/ML clusters, fed with data so they're utilizing all the resources. And because we support multiple protocols, we don't have to do all this copying back and forth across all the different systems. So what that ends up providing from a business perspective, number one, productivity increases tremendously because you're not wasting time on these copying phases. Also, those GPUs or HP systems that are sitting idle, waiting for data, we can keep them being utilized 100%. And what you see on the example on the screen here represents some of our customers that had issues not being able to utilize all the data, and a lot of that copy time, we're able to provide up to a 90% improvement because they were focusing purely on the compute part. Just the reduction in copying produced 75% of the savings of that. And then also from a cost perspective, as well as an environmental footprint, think about if you have one system instead of multiple systems that you have to manage, you have to purchase them, you have to manage them, you have to patch them for security. And consolidating that down to one, you have savings in the management, the cost of the system, as well as the environmental footprints of having multiple systems with the data moving back and forth. So to kind of cover it again in a more simplistic fashion, if you look at any typical data center, you're normally going to find three different categories of systems. Your traditional NAS, enterprise type NAS, easy to use, very high reliability, that's going to fall in this category of simplicity. In terms of lower latency and performance, that's going to be more of your block storage or locally attached NVMe drives. They're not as easy to use necessarily because they're kind of, especially if it's a case of NVMe drives where you're having to move the data back and forth and manage them on a server by server basis, but they have very low latency and high speed. Then the third category is parallel file systems, when you want to really scale to a large level, because of course, in this situation, especially with NVMe drives, you're talking single drives. So if you need to have a lot of data, petabytes of data, that's when you're getting into this scale. And there are good systems, parallel file systems in this area, but they are typically not necessarily enterprise class. A lot of them are sort of open source type alternatives. And we see those more in the HPC space because they don't need to have that typical uptime that you would see in the enterprise side. And they're also very, very difficult to manage. So WEKA, with the approach, this clean sheet of paper approach that we use, manages to provide enterprise class simplicity and uptime with low latency performance like you would see in Flash, as well as the ability to scale to massive exabyte levels all in one system. So one of the, oh, by the way, so I'm just going to comment as well. If there's any questions that are coming out, Alex or Pratik, feel free to interrupt me and do that. Happy to take these on the fly as we go. So everything that we've been talking about up to this point has been in this sort of background of AI ML. And so, one question might be, well, is WEKA only for AI ML? Is that all that this does? And the answer is actually no. What we found was that those workflows, the need to have the previous need that customers have of needing to have different types of storage architectures to provide those different storage characteristics actually meant, or what we actually found is that those sit in a lot of different use cases as well. So life sciences is another big one, working with genomics, where you have these giant human or it could be animal genome sequences as well, but you have these large genetic sequences, but a lot of the processing that's done here is slices of those sequences. So it could be hundreds of thousands and millions of files, very, very small. The performance characteristics of very large files versus small files, typically in your traditional storage systems, are very, very difficult to manage. And so WEKA is designed for those types of cases in the work that we did with AIML. And so with life sciences, we found that's actually a really, really good use case as well. HPC kind of closely follows what you're doing in AIML. They use a lot of the parallel file systems. Our performance sits very well there. And now the ease of use of WEKA provides additional value into that HPC space. Fintech, manufacturing, there's a lot of these areas where there's growth taking place that require those same characteristics. The most recent one that we've discovered has actually been in the area of media and entertainment. So you may be thinking, okay, yeah, for streaming, when you've got multiple parallel streams, I can see where that would be helpful. But there's also other areas when you talk about like 4K, 6K, and 8K cameras that are out in the field now that are being used to capture data, and the need to drive serious amounts of bandwidth to capture that data. And then all of the work that's being done in CGI, whether it's movies, TV shows, commercials, videos, those are huge files being broke up into small files and then reassembled back, rendered back into large projects. Those are very, very difficult workloads for traditional storage systems to work with. But WEKA, again, because of the architecture, does really well with these mixed file workloads. So talking a little bit more about, and this is about as technical as we'll get. If there's technical questions, we can certainly try and answer them on this call. I think Alex and I can stick around afterwards if people like. But if there's enough interest, we actually could have one of our WEKA SEs do a second call and go into a much deeper dive into the WEKA architecture. But at a high level, typically, some of the things that you'll find with WEKA, number one is I talked about the protocols. Those are the different languages that have to be spoken, if you will. And so we support traditional protocols like SMB, NFS, S3, but we also provide the high performance protocols like you typically see in the HPC and AIML space. And those are POSIX and NVIDIA GPU Direct. We also support the Kubernetes CSI plugin, which is very interesting if you're looking into the container space. If you think about containers, that's sort of the next wave of consolidation, much like we saw going from bare metal servers to VMs, where you could have a lot more workloads stacked into one server. The same thing is now happening with containerized workloads, where you're able to abstract off the OS, and so you can have even more applications running on a server. So what does that mean? It means increasing storage demand on that server, which requires a more powerful storage system. So you have all of these different protocols which WEKA can communicate with the clients. So that right out of the box is actually it's a fairly significant thing, because we don't have to copy data back and forth because we might not support protocols. We support them. What WEKA actually looks like is we are software defined. So we are a software company. And as we'll get to a little bit later on with Alex, we depend on a company like Lenovo and their hardware in order to actually build the storage system. And so what you see here is a number of Lenovo servers with WEKA software installed on them. And we're using, these are typically filled with drives, and we are using those servers essentially as a storage system. So if you think about traditional storage, what is it? There's compute nodes that are doing the storage software and that functioning of it. There's a whole bunch of bays for drives. There's a backplane and network, and that's essentially it. So what WEKA is doing is we're focusing on the software part. We're utilizing Lenovo and their expertise in server design to build out the hardware. So we've got a great solution from both sides to build out this storage solution. Now, what you have in these servers is all high-speed NVMe SSD. So we're very, very high performance. Now, I mentioned before that we can scale out on a very, very large level. So if we go back to that AI/ML example, what if after a customer ran their workload, they're done analyzing stop signs, they don't need to use that anymore? Do they just delete it? Delete that whole work that they did? Probably not. They probably don't want to keep it on their very expensive NVMe flash, but they need to put it somewhere. And traditionally, what you would do is you would copy it off to tape, move it someplace, and if you ever needed it, there's a bit of a process to try and kind of bring it back online and to be able to access that. With WEKA, what we're able to do is expand out and tier that off to object storage. And so we can run only in flash, where everything would be high-speed NVMe flash, but we can actually connect to WEKA certified object storage instances. Examples of this might be Ceph, Cloudian, and so we can tier off to them, and then all the metadata still stays on the WEKA flash tier. So that whole catalog of where everything is accessible at very high speed. But when we're pulling the data in, it's either coming off of that flash tier, or based on the policies that are in place, it may be coming through on that object tier. And that's user definable based on the customer's requirements, but it's all there, and it all appears as if it was nearline. There's no sort of going out to fetch it and bringing it back into space. It's all there and available, and it's just a matter of how quickly it's able to pull up, is a matter of whether it's sitting on that object storage or it's sitting there local on the flash tier. And so that's one of the ways that we're able to balance costs a little bit, and whether it's a warm tier or hot tier based on the characteristics of that customer data. One other thing I'll comment here is you'll see it says public cloud. So WEKA has a fantastic story when it comes to public cloud versus on-prem. WEKA initially was designed on public cloud. We first ran in AWS. So unlike a lot of traditional storage companies that started on-prem and then have been trying to find a way to operate on a carved out version of one public cloud or some sort of an instance around that, we actually use the same code stack that we run
My
on-prem.
name is Tom Henry.
All right. Thanks, Tom. We can run either the software stack that we deploy on Lenovo servers is the exact same software stack that we deploy on public cloud. And so there's a lot of really interesting things that we can do. We can snapshot to your on-prem object storage. You could do another snapshot of that up to public cloud and use that for DR. If your on-prem site were to go down, you can actually launch a full instance of WEKA in public cloud, point it at that S3 bucket, and be up and running. So this is an important thing to talk about, because what we find a lot of times when we're talking to customers is maybe the CIO, maybe someone has a cloud-first initiative, maybe not for today, but whatever they're putting in place, it's important that they have something that's flexible to be able to run in the public cloud. And we absolutely have that, because we can go, like I said, on-prem or in public cloud or some sort of a hybrid model. So this is a very unique differentiator for WEKA as well.
And Ed, question in the chat. What public clouds do you support?
Oh, so we support the major ones. So AWS, GCP, Azure, and Oracle Cloud. Thank you. That's a good question. So from a WEKA perspective, a couple of things I want to point out here. Number one is the way that we are. Well, number one is this technology that we have. This was clean sheet of paper approach. So our founders looked at that AI/ML workload and designed a solution to that from the beginning. We're designed around the latest technology in network cards to basically bypass the CPU. Anything that stands in the way of the data path, we try to go around that. We use something called DPDK to do that on the network cards. We also utilize 4K blocks, which is what you typically see in NVMe drives, whereas most traditional storage architectures are built on 1 megabyte blocks like you find from HDD or spinning disk. And so what we have built is unique. We have over 40 patents granted, 95 pending. And so it's a very unique approach that WEKA has put together. This isn't sort of a me too where you're going to see a lot of other companies coming up with something similar. A couple of things I want to highlight is our linear scalability. And Alex will give a little bit of a highlight of this when he's talking about when you actually see the architecture of the different the server clusters. But as you add, we scale linearly. And so as you add more servers to a cluster, you're going to get a consistent scaling of that performance. So if you had a 6-node cluster and you were to buy 6 more nodes, you would double the performance. If you had another 6 nodes, you would get another 50% on top of that. So it's very linear in that scaling. Another thing is this auto tuning. The main point there, and I kind of touched on this before, is we can support large files and small files concurrent. That's something that's very, very, very difficult for traditional storage systems. And that's a good question when you're talking with your customers to see if they're having challenges in that area, because a lot of folks aren't familiar that the WEKA technology exists to solve that problem for them. So to kind of summarize everything I've been talking about, there's a lot of storage solutions out there. The 4 things that you see on this slide, many of those storage solutions can do some of these things. WEKA is the only company that can do all 4 of these, and we do all of them exceptionally well. So the multiple protocol support out of the box, no add-ons, no separate protocol servers. We do this built into the way our architecture is. That's number 1. Number 2, very, very high performance on mixed workloads. We don't have to custom design it based on the workload, based on each workload, which is traditionally what you're going to find with traditional parallel file systems. So we don't have a need for that. We can do them all out of the box. Number 3 is that global namespace, the ability to tier off to the object storage and have that large, what appears as a very, very large namespace, but that automatic tiering between high-speed flash and a warm S3 storage tier. And then number 4 is the cloud-ready story, where we run the same code stack on-prem as in public cloud. So, like I said, this is all wonderful and great, but it doesn't do a whole lot of good if you don't have a great hardware solution to run on. So, Alex, I'm going to hand it over to you for this next part.
Okay, thanks, Ed. So, we worked with WEKA here to design the hardware portion of things. We wanted to take advantage of a few things. One is build it off of our industry-leading servers, industry-leading reliability and performance, and also kind of keep that simplicity message throughout the entire process, through ordering, through quoting, through sizing and everything like that. So we've created a variety of what we're calling ready nodes.
Oh, Alex, I think you just hit mute.
Yep. All right, I'm good. Can you hear me again now? All right. So we've built these ready nodes. They're targeted for specifically the WEKA solution, and excuse me. So we've built it so that when you go in to configure these and size these are aligned to kind of best practice and everything like that. So it's very easy and simple for you to kind of start building out your building blocks and scale as you go. So you can start as small as the customer wants. So a minimum of 6 servers is the WEKA minimum for a cluster. But then again, as Ed mentioned, scale linearly and grow with the customer. So a customer could start at 6, add a single node at a time and grow from there and continue to kind of get that performance. And also it gives you the flexibility both from Intel and AMD. We have nodes for both processor types. We can have 1U and 2U types. So we have a variety of different hardware platforms kind of based on the density requirements customer might have. And again, so each of these nodes are kind of pre-designed so that they're aligned to what the sizing tool will put out. So you can go in, click it, and I think we have an example here at the end. We can show you in the configurator how easy it is to do, and then you can tweak and tune based on some of the customers. So there's still some flexibility there. Change out the amount of capacity, amount of density you need in the system, or if the customer based on the customer's networking requirements. So, we go all the way up from, 100 gig network all the way up to a 400 gig network. And then we can install the software and build out the cluster, and the customer is good to go. So next slide. So how that actually looks in a customer's environment. So typically, this is a flash only example. So you start again kind of with a minimum of 6 servers. You add your switches, or if the customer already has switches in their environment. And then Lenovo we also have all the software available as well. So you can build and price the whole solution together from Lenovo all as one giant solution. So you build that out, you kind of add all your building blocks together, whether that's AMD or Intel, kind of pick your capacity, networking speed, add your licensing in, and you're good to go. And then if you go to the next slide, you can also then, as Ed mentioned, you can do the all flash kind of high performance all the way through, but a lot of customers, we know that as they get into the much larger size, 10, 20 petabytes space, they want the ability to have a lower cost S3 option to tier off some of that data. So we have the ability then to add in an object tier as well, and we can build that out. We'll have some ready nodes as well with Cloud incoming that'll help with this for if you're looking for that. You can also do it with Ceph, or we can work with the public cloud as well.
I'm
So
gonna
we can
send
build out
George a
that.
note because I don't think we got anything back yet.
So we can build that out regardless of kind of whatever your object tier is, or whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, or in the public cloud, excuse me. And again, kind of you can build each one of these components together and kind of build the entire end-to-end Lenovo solution all as one and present that to the customer. And then lastly, just kind of go into the software a little bit. So your main software offering is the WEKA XPS. That's your high performance file software stack. So that gives you, all of your that's your flash tier license. That gives you all the protocols Ed mentioned, all of the performance and snapshotting and everything like that. And then you have the ability to add on optional software, whether you want some additional data protection options, such as the snap to object. If you're doing that tiering to object, we have the data tiering license, and then we also have the hybrid cloud edition as well. We can sell. So for customers that want to tier to the public cloud as well. So you have all 4 software options there as well. So again, you can kind of mix and match based on what the customer needs. Try to make it as simple and easy for you all to kind of quote and build out as we can.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple additional details here. So what you see in this section, these are all loaded into DCSE for configuration. The WEKA Cloud Edition, we do not have this in DCSE today. That's something we may add in the future based on the demand for it. Typically, everything, if it's on-prem, the WEKA XPS is something that would be done only, but if you want to have portability, whether it's from on-prem to public cloud or across multiple public clouds, that's where we have the hybrid cloud edition. So
turn it back over to you, Ed.
Yeah, okay. So this is a nice summary of the WEKA platform. With a Lenovo hardware stack, I think some of the things here that Alex already mentioned, but we support Ethernet or InfiniBand. So traditionally, we see more InfiniBand in the HPC space, Ethernet in other places, but we support both of those, Intel or AMD processors. We do require NVMe SSDs, and the reason for that is for the performance. Of course, it makes sense that you would want to have those. Another thing I want to highlight here are the data services. We support the services that you see here: tiering, snapping to S3, backup and DR. One I do want to highlight is at-rest and in-flight encryption. So not all of the storage, other companies provide both of those. So we provide both of those in software. We don't require a secure encrypting drives, and as well as security and authentication measures. And from a user interface, this is not such a big deal if you're looking at the enterprise space, but when you're looking at the parallel file system, having things like a GUI management console and plugin for REST APIs is actually something fairly important in that space. So we have all of these, as well as we talked about before, the support for all of the protocols that we already talked about. So I think we talked about some of this before already. There's a number of areas where customers are using WEKA. Anything, life sciences, fintech, so finances, in an area where it's performance dependent. So if it's running an ERP workload where the storage they've been using for the last 20 years is working fine, that's probably not the best place. They're not necessarily going to appreciate or need a lot of extra performance. But something like algorithmic trading, where being able to process information much faster and get that competitive edge, those are the areas where WEKA can make a real difference, and we're seeing success in that side. One of the things I would also recommend is the AI ML space. Many companies that you wouldn't think would have any type of, and I can't name companies, but just think of any large Fortune 500 company that you maybe it's in retail or something like that, that wouldn't normally be something that you would think of for high performance. Well, there's so many AI ML projects that are taking place today that it actually is worth asking. Where are you seeing the data growth inside of your company? Do you have any types of AI ML projects? Those are good questions to ask, because those are the, whatever is driving a lot of data growth today, those are the areas where that data is probably being gathered. There's a good likelihood it's being gathered for an AI ML type of project. And so that's a great probing question to use as you're talking to customer prospects. So examples to where it's good to position WEKA. Look for anything with a lot of GPUs attached. A lot of GPUs points to also customers running AI ML workloads. Takes a lot of data to feed GPUs, and GPUs are data hungry, which means performance. So if you're finding that in your customer set, there's a good chance that there's a good discussion around WEKA. Also, we talked about this a little bit already, the multiple IO profiles. So large files and small files is very difficult for storage systems to handle. So customers are going to be very excited to hear about options that you may have there. The multiple protocols is one we also talked about, and also ease of use. So like we talked about, also the parallel file systems are more difficult to use. That skill set may be difficult to find. And so something like WEKA that you can put in is ready to go, doesn't require a lot of tuning, if any, means a lot much faster time to value. And then we start small and grow. So 6 nodes is the minimum. We do like to target around 250 terabytes for the minimum size. So that's kind of a good number to keep in mind when you're looking at opportunities as well. If it's 80 terabytes, it's probably too small for WEKA, and maybe better to look at other solutions. So around 250 or higher is definitely, look for that, look at some of these other things, and that would be a great way to start qualifying some of these opportunities. So maybe I'll hand it over to you for this next one, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. So you can see here, I mean, here's a screenshot of our the DCSC configurator. Go into that configurator. Underneath storage, you'll now see a software-defined storage section, and you can see right there the Think System Ready nodes for WEKA. So if you click on that link, it'll open up to the next page, and you'll see kind of 8 different CTOs there available for you to configure. So we have, like I mentioned, we have the SR630, 635, 650 and 655. So we have these certified nodes across all of them, both the V2 and V3 servers. So, if, I think today, for most part, customers are probably looking at the V2 servers, but as we move to, PCIe 5 and NVMe 5 drives and the higher, Ethernet and InfiniBand speeds like 400 gig, and then we'll start moving to the V3 servers. But they're all in there, they're all available, and again, you'll see that you'll find that under the storage tab.
Yeah, I think if we have time, I think Pratik's going to show a
Yeah.
quick demo of that as well. And I'll actually cover this one. So I don't know that this is available broadly unless you have a reseller agreement with WEKA, which if you're interested in that, by all means, feel free to reach out to us. But at Lenovo, we do have a sizer set up with Lenovo. So the Lenovo sales team can assist with this absolutely. And it's a way of, so WEKA is licensed by usable terabyte, not by net or a gross terabyte. And so the sizer is a wonderful tool to use to figure out, what based on, so when you get into these larger requirements, there's a lot of different ways that you could configure a server. Do you go with a 1U? Do you go with a 2U? What size of drives do you want? And so this is a nice tool that does sort of the analysis for you to help come up with what the best options are, or in this case, in some situations, maybe if the customer doesn't need exactly 1,500 or 1.5 petabytes, there's some other solutions that are a little bit lower, but much more economical in the utilization of the drives. And Alex, do you want to do this last one?
Yep. So, we also have a variety of sales materials out there. So, if you have access to HighSpot, check that out. We have some solution briefs and some sales collateral and everything like that to help you leave with the customer and kind of give that high level briefing. Like you can see in the one, it's got kind of the before and after WEKA example that Ed walked through at the beginning of this presentation. So I highly encourage you to check that out, and and also engage the Lenovo storage specialists as well as help you with the sizing and that kind of thing as well.
Perfect. So let me do this. Let me actually jump to that site that we were talking about for the DCSC, aka the configurator tool. So give me 1 second. So again, there are multiple ways to get into the configurator tool itself, but the easiest way is going through LPH and clicking on Infrastructure Solutions Configurator. You can click on that. Of course, it's going to be a little bit slow, but okay. And then here's where we're going into for storage, and then into that software-defined storage category. Once we click on that, like Alex kind of mentioned, there was there are 8 different varieties. So Alex, I wanted to kind of get your input on maybe, how do I know which one is the right one? How does my partner kind of figure that part out?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I think it depends. I mean, the answer is always it depends, but kind of based on what the customer prefers, I would say, generally speaking, I'd say the 1U, so either the SR630 or 635 are typically kind of where I would recommend starting. That provides the best density, generally speaking, and kind of the best performance to density trade-off. I think today, like if I was sizing one today, it'd probably be the V2 servers. But if the customer is looking for PCIe 5 and and NVMe 5 drives, definitely look at the V3 servers. But again, and then it comes down to the customer preference of AMD versus Intel. Do they, if they have a preference, some customers have a very strong preference one way or the other. The other way is using that sizing tool. It'll give you recommendations based off of kind of the customer's performance requirements and capacity. We've done testing with WEKA on what the performance characteristics of those various servers are, and and we'll kind of give you the recommended version. And again, you saw kind of in the slide, there's the option or it gives you multiple options, so you can kind of pick and choose based on, again, on that customer preference. And if you actually click into it again, they're CTOs, so when you click into any of them, they're kind of good to go. They're a valid config right out of the gate, but you do have the flexibility to, again, change your drive capacity or change your networking or something like that as needed. But it'll give you a valid starting point that's should make it as easy as possible for you.
Perfect. Yep. I think my partners really appreciate that, one click where they can actually be able to download that config and then customize it as they would need. So definitely, I think they should be familiar with that. If they're not, reach out to any of us on the call today and we could definitely help with that. But, what I wanted to do was, start, closing out today's session. We're fairly coming to the end here. And, what I wanted to do was, just leave you with some important information. Give me 1 second. First, I wanted you to reach out to my storage specialist, Tony Williams. He's on my team. For any storage opportunities you may have, or if you want to learn about some of the latest storage promotions for this quarter, he's your guy. Next, I'm going to share some link here. Give me 1 second. There you go. Yep. Next, I wanted to remind you to register for June's Lunch and Learn events. There are 2 different ones. There's one for IDG and ISG that are happening. I prefer you register for both of them, but definitely, keep an eye out for that one. And then finally, I wanted to kind of leave with some key takeaways from today. What I'm seeing is that this Lenovo and WEKA storage solution is really a good choice for businesses of all sizes. That's what I heard so far. Any business that needs reliability, scalability, and cost-effective storage solutions, this seems to be the ideal solution for it. So, and what I've seen is, or what I've heard so far is that it's really particularly well suited for businesses that need to store large amounts of data, or even ones that run data intensive workloads. Let me see, if anybody disagrees or agrees with me, let me know in the chat. But that was my key takeaway, to be able to say this is another arsenal in the Lenovo portfolio that says, all right, we have a solution that's available that can definitely help a lot of customers. And finally, I wanted to thank my guests, Ed Stickney and Alex Kranz, for sharing their insights with us. Everyone, I think we've come to the end here. I don't see any questions in the chat, but thank you for joining us. Make it a great day and have an awesome Tuesday. Goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Pratik.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.